Is Jimmy Sexton the most powerful man in college football?
Darn close if he's not, right? I mean, he doesn't shape the sport so much as the people who make the sport happen on the field. And I think those jobs, those coaching jobs, and going back to Saban, are a younger man's thing, and maybe not like the king forever kind of stuff. So maybe the agent and the coaches will lose a little bit of power in the next 5 or 10 years just because, gosh, what drudgery, right? Like what year round, nobody, I mean, okay, it might be $7 or $9 million, but you're working 24/7, 365, because somebody could call, somebody could transfer, a parent could do whatever else. It's just not, until they reel that stuff in. Coaching the NFL is much better than coaching college football right now.
I think about that a lot. And I think the main thing that I think about with that is we saw that happen in state college with Bill O'Brien, right? Like he was burnt out. Like you could tell even after 2 years,
And
aside from
that
the
was
extra
before the
pressure.
free agency and
Right.
NIL and whatever
Yeah.
else.
Like
Right?
I I think about that. I think about that with guys like Vrabel and all of some of these other guys. Like if I make it to the NFL as a coach, I'm never going back to college, even if it was for my alma mater, because I just don't think, not that those guys don't work as hard or work hard, but it's just you don't have to be that 24/7. I don't think as
I
much.
forget if I told you that when I was covering Pitt years ago, there was an offensive line coach named Jack Henry who coached for the San Diego Chargers, came to Pitt to coach their offensive line. And I asked him, I mean, he lost the job at the Chargers, but I was asking him, what's the difference between pros and college? He said, look, football's football. He said, but you just change different bags at the door. I'm like, what do you mean? He said, look, in the NFL, I got to worry about a guy, his family life, something with his wife and whatever else. He said, in college, I got to worry about a kid going out and drinking, maybe. You got parents to deal with. He said, it's just different baggage at the door. The sport itself is the same. And I'm like, well, which one's better? He's like, depends what you have the patience for. He said, we're about to find out what I have the patience for because it was, college was just starting back up again for him. But I think that's with OB and some other stuff. It's one thing to have prima donnas you're going to deal with in the NFL and agents and challenges and whatever else. I still remember riding the caravan bus with O'Brien, and I think it was Brenneman who called on the phone when he was getting recorded and was like, or when he was getting recruited. And when OB got off the call, he's like, this kid keeps calling me dude on the phone. He said, when that guy gets to campus, it's gonna F and be coach. Like I'm not his dude, right? And you get that, I'm sure, more from kids now, entitled and whatever else. So it's just what you want to deal with. And I just feel like the NFL has less stuff.
Yeah, I just no no desire no desire to be a college football head coach. You have to be different. It you have to be built different. And I think I wonder if, especially with like you mentioned, like all of the other stuff that is involved with college football now, which is NIL, transfer portal, the way the playoffs shake out, the conference expansion, everything else. I wonder if we're going to see less mastermind coaches and more GM coaches, more coaches that are okay. I know a little bit about how to coach and handle the situation. I need you, offensive coordinator, you defensive coordinator, to handle the actual X's and O's and come to me with a plan and I'll sign off on it type thing.
Yeah, I
Maybe
don't
that's
think they'd
how
ever
it
say it that
works.
way, right? I don't
But
think they'd
yeah,
say it that way. But I think you're gonna have more people who are you I don't it would seem very difficult to manage the X's and O's along with all the off-field stuff. You're going to have an area of expertise. You're going to sign off on stuff. Not that you're not going to be connected, but it just would seem really hard to do all that really well. So I think you're right. You might not have the mastermind. I also think you won't have the people who are there 30 years at a spot or 20 years at a
mm-mm.
spot. I mean, you've got a decade of James Franklin. Man, I think 10 or 12 years, 10, 15 years for somebody somewhere is just going to be enough, even with success, right? It just becomes tough, especially with the money they're making at this level now. At some point, you could say, thank you, I've got enough. I'm taking my money and actually going to enjoy life.
Yeah. I mean,
But they aren't wired that way either,
no,
honestly.
that's a good point. I think about that. That's funny you say that because I think about that a lot with James Franklin, right? Like, is there, speak going back to Saban, there was that video of him getting in his Ferrari, right, in his garage and showing that to a recruit. What does James Franklin spend his money on? And I, where I'm going with that is essentially there has to become a point where you look at your bank account and say, I think I'm good. I've got enough here to be quite comfortable for the rest of my life without everybody yelling at me for every little decision that I make. I don't know. And I think it's just also going back to what you said. Some of these people are just wired differently than you and I.
No, it's the competitor. I'm sure
Yeah.
that's what it is, right? Like it's the competitor in them in the competition. So that's great. But man, yeah, if you're someone who's 51 years old and the head coach of a football program and you've had good success and you get 4 or 5 more years out of it and do good, and I don't know, like you could go on TV and make almost as much money with since certainly 75% less headaches. So yeah.
I mean, if and that's the thing with Saban, right? Like, and I think even we there was that being alluded to allegedly or whatever with Mike Tomlin of maybe TV, and we saw that with we just kind of see it with some of these players, and Matt Ryan I feel like is a good example of that. Maybe could have had a little bit longer of an NFL career, but at least it's easier money in my opinion. Not that what people do for TV isn't hard work, but it's just yeah. So okay, I wanted to get your thoughts on Saban. It's good. It's weird.